Watson, BBC.
Just before I ask on the topic, can I just be clear what you did say to Simon Dudley? Did you say you are sacked because of his comments?
I haven't spoken to him. He's under Richard Tice's department. Richard appointed him housing spokesman, given his depth of experience in developing new towns, but the comments were deeply inappropriate. They were, frankly, rather shocking to many people, and Richard has dealt with it.
He told him to go, or did he offer to resign?
No. What I've done in this party, I've got a leader of Scotland, a leader of Wales, I've got 4 people who've taken on their own departments, and they're in charge of those departments. And this takes us so far away from the old criticism of it being a one-man band. It isn't. Richard Tice has dealt with it.
Okay, Richard Tice has sacked him. Right. Can I come on to the topic of your conversation? You talked about having backbone, Robert Jenrick. A third of your voters are over 65. Another third are getting there. Isn't it the case that you didn't have the backbone to take on the triple lock, and what in fact you're doing is, rather than being a radical and bold party, you are in effect just indulging old pork barrel Westminster politics?
You won't be saying that in 2 weeks' time, let me assure you, where you will see the most radical proposals to cutting welfare ever seen in the history of this country. And the sum of money involved here, and obviously we can't say precisely what it is because of the way it's calculated, will appear very, very small indeed compared with what's to come.
Look, I would just add that there is no other party in British politics that is committed to what I've just set out today. Scrapping foreign aid for rich countries, ending the net zero madness and saving billions in the process, ending giving universal credit and benefits to people who are not British citizens, to substantial reforms to the welfare budget. None of those things are going to happen under Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves. So it is only reform that has the backbone to fundamentally change the consensus in this country and save the tens and tens of billions of pounds that are needed to do this. And if you're asking me, are we here to protect pensioners and to support them and ensure they have dignity and respect in the last decades of their life, then yes, absolutely. And they should always be put before people who've just come to this country, or people who broke into this country, or crazy net zero schemes that enable Ed Miliband to swan around the world and look good in Davos, and former ministers to get minted on the international circuit after they leave office. We will put the interests of British people first, and that includes pensioners.
We're going to give young people opportunities and jobs by completely reshaping the education system, where we've driven millions of young people in the last 25 years. A Blair policy, enthusiastically adopted by the Conservatives. We've driven people towards social sciences degrees, huge amounts of debt, and we've de-skilled Britain. We've de-skilled Britain. You speak to anybody running an engineering company, they virtually now have to employ from abroad, because we've literally not produced people and encouraged them into skills. And interestingly, trades and skills that now pay much better than most office jobs in this country. So a fundamental reshaping of the education system, of encouraging people to go into areas that are going to be needed. And I would also add to that we now have more youth unemployment in our country than the European Union does. That would have been unthinkable 5 or 10 years ago, and they must have got their sums wrong. But the Reeves budgets have seriously damaged the prospects of under 18s getting the kind of part-time work that gets them into the culture of work. And the tax on jobs is totally counterproductive. And you know, now that April the 1st is here, well, second now, but now that it's here, I think the job shedding that you're about to see in hospitality and entertainment is going to be frankly eye-watering. So I think both of those things have to work together.
Very good.
Great stuff. Let's go on to Ali Fortescue, Sky News.
Thank you, Ali Fortescue, Sky News. Nigel, you previously said that pensions are unaffordable on a national level. That was, I think, about 9 months ago. Can you just be really specific with what's changed since then? And can I also ask, you know, you're a straight talker, so I'm hoping we can get a straight answer. This fundamentally is about bolstering the grey vote, isn't it?
Public sector pension provision is just about the biggest long-term problem that British governments face with budgets. It's never discussed. It's never debated. You know, I haven't seen it being talked about on mainstream news for years, probably. And I think what Robert has said today is that we're going to address that. That new entrants that come in and work on the public sector will have to go on to the kind of pension schemes that everybody in the country who's in the private sector is on. And we've had this incredible division between the public and private sector that's grown and grown and grown over the course of the last 20 years. And I think that is a very, very responsible thing to do. I mean, you could argue that nothing's affordable at the moment. I mean, have a look at the February borrowing figures. And Iran has got nothing to do with that. You know, every single year we're running way over forecasts, a ballooning national debt. It's tripled since the start of the millennium in percentage terms. And as Robert said earlier, 1 in every £10 that government spends is now being spent on debt interest. So I do actually think that by taking on this long-term pension liability, we're doing something that is brave. We're doing something that won't be very popular with everybody, but we're doing something that absolutely has to be done.
Yeah, I think absolutely. We're taking on a number of the big systemic challenges that the public finance faces today, of which defined benefit pension schemes is one of, well, probably the second largest liability that the state has today. So that is something that no prior party has been willing to talk about because they considered it to be too difficult. It's an example of the kind of thing that Reform is willing to take on. The other, obviously, is our approach to welfare, where we're drawing up, have already said a number of things, we'll say more in the coming weeks, the largest set of welfare reforms that any political party is proposing in British politics today. Those are the choices that we're making to put the public finances on a more sustainable footing. But we're making a choice not to pull the rug away from pensioners. And I think that's the right decision, because Reform is here for working people, what we call Alarm Clock Britain, and equally for those people who've worked and contributed their whole lives and now deserve some dignity and respect in the last decades of their life.
Thank you. Harry Horton, ITV News.
Thank you very much. I just want to pick up on the question that Ian was asking, Robert. As you've just said, wages are flat, taxes and bills are going up. What do you say to young people who can't get on the housing ladder, who struggling to get a job, and they see NHS costs skyrocketing, they see pension costs going up, and they look at this announcement today, and they feel that it's wholly unfair to be prioritising elder people at a time when they're really, really struggling. And then, Nigel, if I can, to you, on the war in Iran. This was a war that Donald Trump started. He now seems to indicate that he's going to leave the Strait of Hormuz for other countries to sort out. It's a mess in the Strait of Hormuz, frankly. Is it fair to leave Europe and other countries to clear up that mess that many people would say Donald Trump has created?
Well, firstly, Harry, in my experience, younger people want their parents and their grandparents to have a decent retirement. And it seems to me there's quite a lot of people who have pretty comfortable lives who seem to want to take away a decent state pension from people who are finding life actually very difficult at the moment. It's not easy to live on £230 a week, particularly when everyone's bills are going through the roof at the moment. And we should be looking after those people. And that is a sentiment that, in fact, all the evidence suggests people of all generations share, particularly people who understand what it's like living in tough circumstances like that. But if you're asking me how can we help young people to have better lives, well, Reform is very clear. We want to get good jobs back into the country. We want to get some economic growth going again. And you do that with a different energy policy to the one that's happened in recent years, which has deindustrialized the country and is making us uncompetitive. We want to ensure that we can get building again so that there are more homes for young people, something that is clearly failing at the moment, where the government is miles off its target, and all governments of recent times have failed to deliver enough. And we want to put the interests of British young people first. I think a British young person like everyone in this country, would be astonished to see the tens of billions of pounds that are being spent on illegal migration, on benefits for people who aren't even British citizens. Our approach is going to make the public finances more sustainable, get good jobs going for young people, but I think most young people in this country would agree with us that the first port of call for savings is not the elderly, is not their parents and their grandparents. That's our approach.
Yeah, look, America and Israel chose this war, and there are consequences for everybody. You're absolutely right. Just as there would be consequences for the whole world if Iran was able to get hold of a usable nuclear bomb. So, that's what you've got to weigh up. That was their decision. It affected us. The British Prime Minister has made a catastrophic error in not allowing America the use, especially of Diego Garcia. I can only guess he wanted to sort of invalidate it as a useful place so that his shameful sellout to Mauritius could happen. Trump is obviously very, very angry. But the fact that we did nothing other than forbid the Americans from being operational didn't stop Iranian missiles being fired at Cyprus. And then, of course, the Prime Minister U-turned the other way and said, you can use the bases, and then we weren't going to send anybody to the Gulf, and now we are going to send people to the Gulf, and frankly, we're all over the place. And it seems that the Prime Minister has upset the Americans, he's upset the Cypriots, he's upset much of the Middle East, and whilst he may be right not to commit us militarily to direct involvement, the truth is we couldn't do it anyway. We haven't got a Royal Navy. And when the American president said this, we thought it was an outrageous insult, but now we have the First Sea Lord saying exactly the same thing. So, it has raised some very, very important issues. Hormuz, obviously very, very crucial. You asked the question, would it be fair? Is it fair? No, we need the Straits of Hormuz opened, and I wouldn't for a minute think that the Americans will walk away from that. But is it fair that a British government, a conservative British government, slapped on super taxes on North Sea oil and gas, forbade onshore production of natural gas? Is it fair that we now face a real gas emergency? And it's coming down the tracks at us very, very quickly. It is wholly unnecessary. We could be not just self-sufficient in natural gas, we could be an exporter of natural gas and have much lower prices. And I'll say this one more time. I've said this before, no one's ever picked it up. Nobody in the press pack's picked it up. The government says if we produced our own oil and gas, it would make no difference to the price because there is a global price. Utter rot. When we buy LNG from America, the natural gas comes out of the ground, it is liquefied, it travels across the Atlantic, where it is regassed and then distributed to where it needs to be. That's not the spot price. That's massively more than the spot price. And 2 Fridays ago, when natural gas had doubled in Britain from this time last year, in Chicago, it was 2% cheaper. If you produce gas close to where you use it, it's massively cheaper. And on oil, the news reports this morning, oil's trading at $106 a barrel. To buy oil now from the Middle East and ship it to us, or wherever else it may be, we're paying $145, $150 a barrel. And this is, as I say, the Conservatives destroyed the North Sea, forbade on-land production. Labour are continuing with this, and we've just got to get the truth out to people that we could be self-sufficient, we could be an exporter, and everybody's home bill and our industrial prices would be substantially lower, and that really would be fair. But I'm afraid it's just one of those many issues why I came back into politics 20 months ago. A consensus between the two so-called main parties on virtually every single major issue. But it's okay, because copycat Kemi has now decided that everything Robert Jenrick says is absolutely brilliant, and she's going to follow all of it. And one quick last point on this, it's quite fun. So Kemi Badenoch went to a North Sea oil rig last week to say, drill, baby, drill. It wasn't an oil rig. It was a decommissioning rig being closed down because of the taxes they put on the North Sea and investment being withdrawn, which I think actually rather perfectly sums the whole thing up. Thank you for that. Andrew Pott from Channel 4 News.
Anya Pop from Channel 4 News. A question for you, please, Mr. Farage. On Iran, Rachel Reeves has said she's angry with President Trump for starting this war. Are you?
I'm not angry with him for starting this war if, and by the way, he's been elected saying no more endless foreign wars. His instincts are not, his instincts are not to do this. And this is not something he's been arguing since he was president. He's been making these arguments for over 20 years, way before he was in politics, asking questions about open-ended wars. So what is it that, okay, Israeli encouragement, I understand that. The Israelis are there and Iran wants to obliterate them and kill them all. So I can understand why Israel would want to do something like this. What persuaded Trump to do it? What was the key motivation? And it's difficult, listening to the press conferences sometimes, to work that out. If the goal of removing Iran as a nuclear power is achieved, the world will have been done a massive favour, even if there are some quite big short-term costs. And there are big short-term costs, but ones that we should never have allowed ourselves to be so vulnerable on. And, we're facing the prospect. I mean, if Hormuz is not opened relatively quickly, I think gas rationing is a possibility. Gas rationing is a possibility by late summer this year. And that, for a country that has an estimated, a geologist estimate of 10 billion barrels of unexploited oil and gas, is a dreadful situation for us to be in. And I think off the back of this, we need to rethink completely what our strategy is. Are we going to go on relying on just-in-time supply chains? Are we going to go on relying on increased food imports, energy imports, strategic material imports, if there are alternatives to do it ourselves? And I think the whole world is now moving to a perspective where it judges things on national interest. And I think Keir Starmer's comments about the European Union yesterday showed he is out of date, doesn't get with where the world has moved. Samara Gill, Talk TV.
I do know we're focusing on pensioners, but just to focus on our out-of-control youths, Sadiq Khan boasted that 2 people got arrested at the Clapham riots a few days ago. What would you have done differently in that regard?
Well, if you're a country that that decriminalises shoplifting, if you decriminalise shoplifting up to £200, which is what's happened over the last 5 years, I suppose, roughly, don't be surprised when what people think is acceptable behaviour rises up in terms of its danger and its threat and its intimidation. And I think there's a lot of people blaming social media platforms. I understand that. But even when you shut down elements on social media platforms, others pop up, others emerge. The people we should be blaming are not the social media platforms. The people we should be blaming are those that behaved in such an appalling, frightening, intimidatory manner. And I'm afraid London is broken. London is lawless. We launched a big campaign on this last year. I was told by so many people I was wrong because the England and Wales crime survey says crime is going down. But I mean, basically now, if you're a victim of a crime in London, you're very unlikely to even bother to report it because the police will do nothing and you'll damage your prospects with insurance companies going ahead. So, yeah, they were appalling scenes in Clapham and elsewhere in the country. And I'm afraid people are going to have to realise that actions have consequences. And all low-level crime needs to be prosecuted because that does stop this move up if you raise the bars or if you raise the levels of acceptability. And, this worked in New York. It worked in New York, where Giuliani turned that city around from one of the most dangerous and frightening in America to one of the safest. And he did it with a bottom-up approach to get rid of low-level crime, and that's where you start. So, yeah, appalling scenes. And actually, it points to, I'm going to go back to this, actually. June the 3rd, 2024, I announced I was coming out of retirement, come back into politics, and one of the reasons I cited was societal breakdown. Clapham the other night was a very clear example of societal breakdown, and frightening and worrying. Thank you. Joseph Draper, LBC.
Mr Farage, Robert Jenrick, who was sitting next to you, seemed quite surprised when you told us that your spokesperson was no longer a spokesperson for the party because of his comments about Grenfell. Don't you think you should have told your own party members that had happened before announcing it to the media today?
No, because it happened about an hour ago, or an hour and a half ago. And it's for Richard Tice to make that announcement, not me. Look, this is not, I'm sorry, it's not a one-man band. You know, I've given individuals responsibility. Robert's brief is very, very clear. That's what today's press conference is all about. This is somebody who was very recently appointed, who, whilst he has a track record in building houses and new towns and stuff like that, clearly acted yesterday in a pretty hurtful, insulting way to an awful lot of people. Sophie Church, Daily Mail.
Thank you. Keir Starmer this morning has been accused of using the war in Iran to draw closer to the EU. Is there anything the PM is set to agree on with the Union that you would repeal if you get into government?
Anything I would do, sorry?
Anything that you would repeal,
Oh,
draw
I see.
back on?
Of course, yes, all of it. I remember doing a debate against Nick Clegg, a head-to-head live debate against Nick Clegg, and the issue of the development of a European army became a key part of that debate. It became a very important part of the debate in the referendum, and the Leave side generally believed better to put our faith in NATO than to believe that European countries, which at the time were only spending 1% of their budgets on defence, was the way to go. As the European defence policy has developed, one of the big boasts is that by Europe all clubbing together, they can all spend even less on defence. I don't see any prospect of a coherent European defence force where people can agree and work together, and to go too far down that road would be a horrendous mistake. Trump is not going to leave NATO, all right? He's very, very angry with us right at the moment, but you could argue he's done NATO a favour by making people start to pay a little bit more money into it. And we will not always agree with America. You know, everyone's looking at this through the prism of Trump. Forget that. Think about any American president. And there are things they will do that we will agree with and things they will do that we will disagree with. But we have to face up to one absolutely bleak and brutal reality, and that is that without America, we are defenseless. Defenseless. And so to upset the Americans so unnecessarily over the use of Diego is a massive error. On the economic stuff, I'll let Robert answer that. You know, the single market.
Oh, yes. Well, look, this is... What's really happening here is that Keir Starmer is trying to use the Iran crisis and his inability to do anything on it as a backdoor to pursue his long-standing ambition to get back into the single market or as close to it as possible. There are some things which we vehemently disagree with. I'll give you one example, which is an open-ended youth mobility scheme. There are 1 million young people in our country today who are not even in employment, education, or training. Our priority reform is to get them into the workplace, to get them into training, rather than having young people from Europe coming over and taking those jobs. Only a chancellor, Prime Minister, that's out of touch, as this pair, would try and import people from elsewhere in Europe when there's a jobs crisis, the highest levels of youth unemployment that our country has seen this century. So that is 100% something that we would remove as soon as we got into government.
2008, the global financial crisis hits. The size of the Eurozone economy is exactly the same size as the American economy. The American economy is now double the size of the Eurozone. So the idea we want to get closer in economic ties to a completely failing economic region of the world, and I repeat the comments of earlier, he is completely out of touch, behind the times, doesn't recognise that the world and the mood has changed. And he's also, in terms of betraying what he promised in the general election, he's competing quite hard for being the most dishonest Prime Minister ever. And there's some competition. Jack Elson from The Sun.
Thank you both. Two quick questions on pensions, please. Obviously, older people are living much longer, pensioners are getting fitter. Do you think that people should be working for longer? Would you increase the state pension age? Maybe people should be working into their 70s. What do you think about that? And then also, obviously, the state pension is universal. It's not means tested. Would you put winter fuel payments back to being universal, or would you keep Rachel Reeves's cut to them? Thank you.
Well, on winter fuel payments, I mean, we were very clear that Rachel Reeves not only broke her word, they said that they wouldn't do it, they did it. We campaigned against it. We both voted against it. And it was right that eventually Rachel Reeves was forced into a U-turn, and that I think is the right way for it to remain. In terms of the retirement age, well, that's a process that has been set independently or semi-independently for many years now, and it's sensible that we take advice on that in the years ahead. But we don't have any plans to increase that.
Think the unthinkable. That's what Frank Field was told. Go away and think the unthinkable, Blair said to him. He did, and he got sacked. We should have addressed this stuff way, way, way earlier. Women's pension age disparity with men, etc. And we are gradually increasing the working pension age. But again, it's one of those massive subjects we'll have to think about and debate at great length. But there is a logic. There is a logic. If provided people are fit, there is a logic to what you say, even if many people find it rather unpalatable. Emily Smith, Telegraph.
Thank you. So just on Simon Dudley again briefly, you said he's been sacked, but before that a Reform spokesman seemed to suggest that Simon had a point on overly burdensome building safety regulations. Do you agree with this sentiment, if not the crass, hurtful language?
I'm not qualified to talk about building safety regulations. That's not my bag. But what I am qualified to comment on is in terms of judgment, what was said in the interview was frankly rather insulting to a very large number of people. So they're two separate things. In general terms, we tend to respond to tragedy by putting masses of regulation in place, which doesn't necessarily stop those tragedies from ever happening again, is the general broad point that I would make. Aaron Newbury, Express.
Good morning. I think Daily Express readers will be delighted to hear Reform is backing the triple lock. Nigel, you've been on a bit of a political journey over the triple lock recently. So can you...
Have I? Do explain. I'm fascinated by this. Tell me. Well, saying the jury's out means the jury's out.
Well, Reform have recently said that it was an unaffordable policy.
Everything's unaffordable. We're running a massive deficit. There is no item of expenditure today that is affordable. We're skint.
So can you guarantee now to Express readers this is it, the discussion is closed, the triple lock is staying? And with regards to your wider pension policies, does this mean Reform is now trying to kind of outflank the Tories, park their tanks on the Tories' front lawn and take the pensioner vote completely?
You can do that. Look, the jury has come to a unanimous verdict. All right? That's what's happened. And I'm not going to be pushed or bullied into, a couple of months ago, commenting on triple lock policy or being asked a question about building regulations. If I don't know the answer, I would jolly well say so, and I'll say the jury's out and try and be straight on that. But the jury has concluded. Robert, I mean, the Conservative position on this, is it even, frankly, on their current trajectory, the big difference between us and the Conservatives is that we're the only ones likely to be challenging to actually have to face making these decisions, is what I would say.
Yeah. Look, the choice of the next general election is going to be, do you want Nigel to be our Prime Minister in a Reform government, or do you want a Labour government, quite possibly in coalition with, goodness knows who, Zach Polanski, Ed Davey, you name it. That's the choice. And so whatever the Conservative Party have to say, it's not really relevant, to be honest. They're not part of the debate, and that's not leading our views. We've made a decision here that we want to support pensioners, give them dignity and security in the last decades of their lives, and to pay for it by making actually some very hard choices elsewhere to stop funding things that are quite obviously not in the interest of the British people.
Ben Clatworthy, The Times.
Thank you both. Nigel, you've touched on this, but on Trump's comments saying Britain doesn't even have a navy, are you saying that you agree with him on that? And Robert, obviously today is about pensions. You say you're the party of alarm clock Britain. Lots of working people who work very hard have been squeezed repeatedly. Are there going to be measures such as increasing the tax thresholds that you'll bring forward for those people that are alarm clock Britain?
It is, I'll do the sea law one of them. Utterly irrelevant. Utterly irrelevant whether I think Trump's comments that we don't have a navy are right or not. I mean, some might say that taking 3 weeks and 1 day to get a single naval vessel to Cyprus was an indication we weren't in good order. You might also say that John Healey, the Defence Secretary, incapable of answering a simple question about what was our current naval capability, contributed towards the reasons that Trump has said that. But forget what I think, it's irrelevant. The First Sea Lord agrees. We are unfit. We don't have an effective Royal Navy that could, in the event of war, be operational usefully. And this fiasco over the Navy ought to be the biggest wake-up call, the biggest security wake-up call this country has had in decades.
Look, people's taxes are too high. People's bills are far too high. And you can see everything that we are doing in reform is trying to help lighten the load on working people, and yes, those who have worked all their lives and are now in retirement. We have chosen a side, which is the people who actually contribute in our society, not the people who've just come, or the people who broke into the country, or the people who are choosing not to work. And if we can find ways of lightening the load, we will do. You've seen that in recent weeks where we've led the national debate calling for scrapping VAT on domestic heating, or having an emergency cut in VAT at the petrol pumps, things that the other parties are all seem to be copying now, and that's great. It's always good. It's flattering to have other people copying your policies. What we want is Rachel Reeves to copy our policy and actually step up, do something, stop just holding all these endless summits and meetings, which are completely pointless. She's behaving like a bystander, not a chancellor in a crisis. And so the people you're speaking about, working people, they want to see some action now from the Chancellor.
George Thompson, Press Association.
Thank you. Firstly, regarding Simon Dudley's comments, would you like to apologise to the victims of Grenfell?
Oh, I'll apologise for everything that's happened in the last couple of 100 years, absolutely. This is modern journalism, isn't it? Apologise, apologise, apologise to victims of the Amritsar massacre, etc. I don't think I can say any more than that, What more can I say than I think the comments, I've said offensive, deeply inappropriate, ill-judged. If that isn't a pretty clear signal, I couldn't even tell you what is.
And on today's announcement, according to the polls, young people don't appear to be voting for reform. Have you pivoted towards this policy because you believe the pension block is the only way to get into government?
No. There are a whole series of choices we have to make across a whole load of issues. And much as today's announcement may well please people who are currently on pensions or imminent to be on pensions, they will also give great pause for thought for many people about to get jobs right across our public services. So, I mean, you can't say that what we've done today is purely a crowd pleaser. We've said something that we believe to be right and to believe to be affordable, but equally we've laid down a marker on something that won't be popular with a large number of people. And these are choices, and they're not things that we're going to deviate from or waver from. Thank you. Jim Pickard, Financial Times.
Jim Pickard, FT. First question for Robert Jenrick. Can you just clarify whether your crackdown on benefits is going to affect British-born citizens as well as those who've come into the country? And a question for Nigel Farage. You said that you know that Donald Trump is not going to leave NATO. Have you spoken to him recently, or is that just your guess?
I've spoken to him many times about NATO, and basically, look, he wants America to be a powerful global force. He is deeply worried about the rise and influence of the Chinese Communist Party, unlike our Prime Minister, who seems to welcome it, and many of his friends and supporters. And to do that, America has to have a global footprint. And there are 15, roughly 15 operational American bases within NATO countries. Is he going to leave NATO and sacrifice all of that? No, I don't think he is. Does he feel, as successive American presidents since Kennedy have felt, that NATO has been a free ride for the Europeans on the back of American taxpayers, and a level of commitment that America makes to Europe that they generally think would not be reciprocated the other way? So there's nothing new in this. It's just the way Donald Trump expresses things gives them a little bit more impact. So, no, if Trump was to leave NATO, you know, that would take America into an isolationist position. Now, there are some in the Republican Party that do take that view, absolutely. But I don't for a minute believe Trump is one of them. Trump wants the rest of NATO to act in concert with him. And as I say, we didn't have to send what's left of the Royal Navy to join the war. But what we did by obstructing was a very, very big mistake.
Look, as regards benefits, I think we've been very clear that we're a party of workers, not welfare. And when it comes to British people who are choosing not to work, then yes, absolutely, we're going to crack down on those people. Because it's completely unfair for people who are getting up in the morning, going to work, putting food on the table for their kids, to see someone living next door to them, lying in bed, having the Motability car on the drive, having an easy life. So we've already set out reforms, and we'll set out more in the months to come for those people. But separate to that, it's very clear that we cannot afford as a country to be providing tens of billions of pounds in benefits to people who have either just recently arrived here or who even came here illegally. And we've made that clear already, that we're not going to provide universal credit, for example, to people who are not Brits. And we're going to be saying more specifically in the next few weeks about that group of people who came in the Boris wave, where the costs to the British state of those individuals, if they remain in the UK for the rest of their lives, is likely to be of a scale that we have not known in our lifetime. A sum of money as big as COVID or the Second World War, a giant sum of money, and that has to be stopped.
The Conservative Party must never be forgiven for the Boris wave. Never be forgiven. A total breach of trust with the British electorate, not just today, but potentially for generations to come, unless someone's got the courage to actually deal with it and correct it. Two more. Oliver Harries, Politics UK.
Question for Nigel. Nigel, you told Politics UK on Tuesday that reform standing with young people remains high compared to other parties. Some people will hear the commitment you've made today to the triple lock and believe you're trying to win over the older voters at the expense of the young. What do you say to those people?
We're not. We're not. This isn't, we're not pitching we're not pitching old versus young as a national political debate. I think the young people have been betrayed terribly. How many graduates are there out there that can't get well-paid jobs because they've got degrees that aren't relevant and have got debt round their necks, so when they do start to earn reasonable money, it's taken away. About 9% is taken away. You know, I think young people have been given a very, very bad steer. You know, I mean, Rishi, when he was Prime Minister, he wanted everyone doing maths till they were 48, or whatever it might be. And it just shows you the mentality. You know, the Oxbridge mentality that has been too important to have people like that, but been too dominant in politics of both parties and just not enough thought about the real world. But we're going to have a lot more. Suella Braverman's going to have a lot more to say on all of this. And you can't force people to go in certain directions, but you can actually encourage people to go in certain directions. And I don't believe the current education system does that at all. I think it's completely failing. I think most of the apprenticeship schemes that we hear about year after year are frankly just a great big con. Last question, Lucy White, Bloomberg.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask you, Nigel Farage, you said in November last year that you were keen not to make any decisions on the triple lock until closer to the election time. You said you needed to take stock of where the economy was at that point. Are you convinced that the economy is not going to sort of significantly worsen between now and 2029? Or are you able to kind of commit to the fact that this is not going to change between now and then?
It's a fair question. It's a fair question. However, where I'm going to disagree with you fundamentally, this lot won't last till 2029. Not a cat's chance in hell. It's falling to bits. The government's falling to pieces. And I don't believe they'll last to 2029. And as it's the end of the press conference, I'm now allowed to briefly mention May the 7th and what's going to happen. And I think what you'll find is that the Prime Minister, the Labour Party, are now in this incredible pincer movement, where there's still 5 weeks to go. I get that. But if you start to look at the West Midlands, and the North West, and the North East, and South Wales, the valleys in particular, you are looking at parts of this country that have been Labour heartlands since the end of World War I. And I tell you what, all the evidence, all the data, all the campaigning that we're doing is we are going to diminish their base in local government and in the Welsh Parliament to a very significant degree. And at the same time, you've got the leftward shift, the strange alliance between the Islamist movement and the trans lobby. I don't quite how that works, I'm not sure, but there you are. And growing evidence, I've not seen it, but third party, that in Tower Hamlets, in Newham, in Lewisham, in other areas, that the Greens are now taking some real chunks of a Labour vote that to a large extent have been taken for granted for decades. So you've got a Prime Minister looking down the barrel of a cataclysmic result on May the 7th. And if that happens, I'd be very surprised if he's still there at the end of May. And I think that will begin the disintegration of this government that will lead us to having a general election next year. Thank you, everybody.